This is a Honda CB750. It's battered, broken, and was picked up as a scrap. For just $400 on Facebook Marketplace. Sounds like a steal, right? Not exactly. See, this bike is riddled with tons of issues that require hundreds of dollars in expert hands to fix. And that's where Austin Coulson comes in. In case you are wondering, Coulson is a pro restorer who fabricates custom vehicles for a living. He's built some really cool stuff in the past, including a 10-ton pizza truck and the smallest roadworthy car you can think of. But can he truly turn this wreck into a sleek cafe racer? Let's find out. One look, and it's crystal clear that this bike is a total mess. Well, it's not like I expected a bike that was bought for peanuts on an online marketplace to be in perfect condition, but the scale of damage on this thing is shocking. The battery was dead on arrival. Coulson's trying his best to resuscitate it, but there are no guarantees. Elsewhere, a failing gasket and a tangled mess of wires also add to the growing list of issues. But this Tennessee-based restorer is up for the challenge. Luckily, the previous owner had already stripped off most parts, sparing Coulson the hassle of a full-scale teardown. He thought about fixing the carburetor for a second here, but then he noticed that the position of the fuel inlet was a bit confusing. After evaluating his options, he temporarily abandoned that mission and turned his attention to the electrical issues. Mere looking at it, you can tell there's a problem with the wiring harness. It took Coulson only a few minutes to confirm this, but it got even worse because he discovered that the battery was undersized and, worst of all, the engine wasn't running. And just when you thought things couldn't get worse, he found yet another problem: a leak around the engine. It's unclear how bad it is, but one thing's for sure, this restoration just got a lot more complicated. But guess what? Coulson wasn't fazed at all because he's got the experience and technical know-how to resolve them all, including this nasty leak that's threatening to ruin the entire rebuild. Plunging straight into the action, he got this fuel tank from an old generator. The idea is to remove the tank's petcock and install it on the carburetor's fuel source. In addition, he's also going to spray the carburetor with WD-40 lubricant to remove the rust and moisture that may be hiding there. But right now, the only thing on his mind was to fire up the engine. That croaked sound just confirmed that Coulson still has a long way to go before this bike hits the road again. And of course, the earlier he starts, the better for him, the bike, and the rest of us who are anxiously waiting to see the outcome. But that's still a long way ahead. Coulson's priority at the moment was to restore each component in the best way that he could, starting with the fuel tank. Literally every part of this is broken, and the fuel tank is no exception. From multiple leaks to rusted edges, it's a complete eyesore. But Coulson is determined to change that. After hours of grinding, welding, and hammering, the tank was smooth. But Coulson wasn't stopping there. He sealed it with POR-15 lubricant to keep rust at bay for good. With the tank now sealed up and rust-proof, it's time to haul it off for painting, but first, Coulson needed to check how it would fit with the seat. In the end, he figured that a few modifications were required, specifically at the rear, where he intended to chop off the tail section and replace it with a rest loop. Next, he outlined his plans to change the handlebar and tweak its configuration to give the bike a low profile. With the plans now duly mapped out, it's time to get on with the work. Once the rear was sorted, he moved straight to the opposite end of the bike, where he kept his promise of altering the setup of the handlebar. From there, he moved over to the rear again to continue from where he left off a few moments earlier. In case you're wondering, the man who assisted Coulson in that clip is Reggie. He's a skilled painter by craft, and he has graciously agreed to apply his magic touch on the fuel tank. But first, he needed to do some basic prep work. Once that was sorted, he grabbed a spray paint to kickstart the next phase of the restoration. Reggie went all in, using a mix of conventional and non-conventional techniques. And with every step, the tank's transformation became more impressive. At some point, I felt like I was watching a stunt artist perform in a circus, as Reggie dabbled with different colors. Here's the fuel tank after its first session with Reggie. It's obviously better than how it was before now, but it's not there yet. After a few more tweaks here and there, Reggie temporarily halted work on the tank so that Coulson could carry on with the overall restoration. But just when Coulson was about to receive the baton, he noticed something awkward. Apparently, there was a significant difference between the two exhaust pipes on the bike. One had a muffler while the other had nothing on the inside. This ultimately created a dilemma for Coulson, who was keen to keep the cost of the restoration down to the barest minimum. In fact, he found a complete exhaust system that fits the bike. But the $300 asking price put him off. There's absolutely no need to be worried though, because Coulson already designed a cheap and efficient solution for it. Rather than buying a complete set of exhaust, he figured he could just cut out the old muffler and install new mufflers on both exhausts. That's going to require more time and effort, but Coulson didn't mind, and neither did Reggie. Both were willing to do whatever it took to get this bike firing again, even if it meant expending more time and energy. These are the mufflers waiting to be installed. Notice the difference between them. That's because one of them is wrapped in fiberglass and tied with a stainless steel zip tie, and the other isn't. I've got no idea why Coulson chose to do this, but I guess we'll find out in due time. Since Reggie was still working on the fuel tank, Coulson brought in this generator fuel tank to fill in the void. And while he was at it, he checked the carburetor float to be sure they weren't stuck. He also touched a few other components, ensuring that everything was properly aligned and ready for the test. But just when he was about to turn on the ignition, an unexpected guest walked in and made Coulson an incredible offer.
Want to get some fuel, Papa?
I already put the fuel in there.
No, I'm getting no fuel for us.
Oh, yeah?
You want some fuel for yourself?
It's so good to know that the kid is out there looking out for his dad at such a young age. But it would be even better if Coulson could get this engine rolling again. That ended with both good news and bad news. Good news is that the engine came on, but the opposite side of that is that the sound is beyond horrible. Also, there seems to be a glaring difference between the sounds of both exhaust pipes. Also, the rumble belted out by the left exhaust pipe is more aggressive than the muted hum produced by the right exhaust. Coulson knew exactly what the problem was. Without wasting time, he wrapped fiberglass around the right exhaust, and this was the result. Now that's exactly how a Honda CB750 motorcycle should sound. Loud, aggressive, and powerful. However, we're still a long way off from our destination. Before Coulson gets on with the work though, how about I show you something interesting and take you on a ride to explore the history of this bike. The Honda CB750 is many things: strong, durable, and efficient. In fact, back in 1969 when it made its debut, it was the world's fastest and most powerful bike. And by the time its modified version was released in 1981, it had become popular for its reliability, smooth ride, and iconic stature, which made it a base for many cafe racer builds. But above all, it was the one superbike that changed everything. Introduced as part of Honda's City Bike legacy, it features a 748 cubic centimeter four-stroke engine and is fueled by 4 Kaihin carburetors, enabling it to deliver 77 horsepower and 9,000 revolutions per minute at peak performance. Back at Coulson's garage, the restorative work was back on. He had already installed a new throttle and everything was looking good until he discovered that the tip of the ferrule was too slim. Coulson intends to fix the tip of the old ferrule on the new one. There's no guarantee it's going to work, but it's worth trying. Thankfully, it worked. But as soon as the task was completed, he delved straight into the next assignment. With help from Reggie, he crafted new custom metal side covers that would match the seat. They absolutely nailed it. But at this point, they decided to split up, with Reggie focusing on the tank and other parts that needed painting. While he was at it, Coulson was busy reassembling the components of the engine. He replaced the clutch cable and even built a custom bracket for it. He also installed a new headlight and constructed a GPS speedometer to replace the cluster. Meanwhile, Reggie was busy doing his thing outside. Now that all parts have been fully restored, it's time to install the last pieces of the jigsaw and take this thing out for a ride. Initially, I thought this last phase would be a walk in the park, but I was wrong. Coulson had difficulties fixing the tank, but after struggling for a few minutes, he figured it out. Next, he tried to align and install the seat and side cover. Those also came with their own troubles, but Coulson found a way around them, and finally, it was time for the big reveal. Countless hours, nearly $1,000, and a relentless determination, Coulson gave his all for this project. The budget is tight, no doubt, but he was able to make the best of the resources he had, and it was fun to watch him all the way from the beginning up to this very critical moment. However, all of the time, effort, and resources he's invested in the project would be irrelevant if this engine doesn't run. The good thing is, we've seen it start earlier, but will it roar to life again? Well, the first few tries were unsuccessful, but Coulson wouldn't give up. He kept on turning the ignition, and eventually the engine responded. From a junkyard reject to a stunning cafe racer, the difference is unreal and absolutely staggering, even though some would argue that he should have used a different color for the fuel tank. But what do you think? Would you have done anything different with this build? Let me know in the comments section, and don't forget to check out other interesting restoration videos on the channel.